Welcome to Sacred Laughter Podcast, the show where we're going to deep dive into mental health and well-being. I'm your host, Chris Dameron, and today we're going to discuss the struggle within. The biggest question is why men struggle in today's world. Why is it that so many men feel the pressure to have it all together, yet often struggle with vulnerability and mental health? As I said, my name is Chris Dameron, and I am your host of Sacred Laughter Podcast. And in many cases, this is a very, very passionate topic about myself or for me. And I know there's a lot of people out there that kind of go through the same issue or want to know why we struggle in today's world. I was actually going to hopefully have my cousin on to have this discussion, but with his schedule and my schedule, we weren't able to work it out, and I apologize for that. But we're gonna explore this topic in more depths. I've noticed both my personal life and through conversations with others that men often carry burdens that are unspoken. We have this dark secret that always hides within our soul and our heart, and a lot of times we don't want to discuss it. So let's break down why this is happening and what we could do about it. From a young man or from a young age, many men are taught to not cry, not to show weakness, and to always be the provider. These expectations can create a feeling of isolation, as they feel they can't express vulnerability or emotion. And I know probably a lot of us out there have been in the same situation where as a very young man or a very young age, you were always told to hold your emotions in. Don't ever show your emotions. In some cases, I felt this way too, growing up, around my dad, my older brother, and specifically my grandpa, where my grandpa would always say, oh, we don't cry, or that, we don't want to show our emotions, don't wear your emotions on your sleeve, keep it in. It always reminds me of I can't remember the show of it. I think it's The League of Their Own, or I could be wrong, but it says there's no crying in baseball, which I always laugh when I hear that because, as an athlete growing up, I always remember like there's times that you would go through scenarios, if it was through any sport you play, where you feel the emotion come on you and you want to express it, but you don't, because you don't want to feel weak, or you don't want to show people that you're weak, and you don't want to show people that you do have emotions. And it's a little aggravating. Now as a father of two daughters, it's when they get very emotional and they want to start crying, like I have like in some cases I have like this desire to be like, hey, why are you crying? Or what can I do to comfort you? And in some cases, I need to ask myself the same question. When I'm going through emotion and I don't really want to share the reason to my wife or even my daughters, then I hold it within, and it's like, why? Like, why am I holding it? Especially to the ones I love dearly, and the people that are constantly around me. Why do I have to continue to hide my masculinity, or why do I need to keep hiding it behind my masculinity, and not just express it in a way that they would understand, or a way that they would know that, I do have feelings or I do have emotions when it comes to certain things. And I will tell you, through the years, I've been a little bit more open to expressing my emotions outward. If it's over a good movie, or, we're having a very good conversation and then you get overwhelmed with some emotions. And even in some cases, listening to music and the type of music that we listen to, you're going to be overwhelmed with the emotions. Just let it out, right? It's okay. But we're going to define a little bit of the toxic masculinity and explain its role in men feeling trapped by unrealistic standards. And that's very true. It's the unrealistic standard. Whoever told you that you did not need to act this way is wrong, right? For them, they acted that way because that's the way that they were taught, and they think it's that generational thing for society is, no, like, you're not supposed to do this, but it's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. And I'll even go in depth as, and in many conversations that, in today's society, because we have the community of the lesbian, transgender, gay and stuff like that. I'm not against it. Absolutely not. That's not what I'm trying to say. But we have, in some cases, we have men or boys that are raised more on the feminine side and they act differently. Okay, got it. Understood. But they express their emotions at a level that masculine men don't, and they get looked at funny. They get chewed out, or it's fighting words to some people like, oh, you act this way, you're not supposed to act this way, whatever. It doesn't matter, right? To me, it doesn't matter. I just find it ironic that, when people that are very masculine, they hide behind their emotions, but the ones that are able to express their emotions, are more genuine. They care more. They care more about themselves. They care more about the people around them. So, toxic masculinity often teaches that men's worth is determined by his ability to dominate, succeed financially, or suppress emotions. But what happens when those ideas don't align with the man's true feelings or circumstances? Let's even go back a little bit, even for myself. Like last week, or I think it was last week when I talked about the test of life, going into taking this test and I failed. I put so much pressure on me, right? I had the dominant feeling that I had to continue to provide for my family. If it was financially, everything, that if I did not pass this test, or I did not meet the agenda that I had for myself, then I was letting my family down. And that's not true, right? We all have jobs. We all want to be successfully financially fit to provide for our families. And that's fine. But there are going to be roller coasters in our life where we're going to feel that we're overwhelmed. We're going to feel that the burden, depressed, anxiety. And we can't hide behind that, because that goes back to that dark spot within our soul and dark spot within our body, that it's just going to continue to wear and tear at us. And, we need to be like that charging lion that's out there in the wilderness that is continuing looking for the battle. And if you win, you win. Let's congratulate each other. Let's hug it out, show our emotions of winning. And if we lose, same thing. We have emotions to express ourselves for our defeats as well. But why do people suppress their emotions? And that's like one of the biggest questions, for men specifically. Like I said, we hold that inner emotion inside, right? We've all seen on social media lately that there's all these things that talk about, hey, if you're ever in a room with another guy and you guys had drinks or something, ask him how he's doing. He'll tell you, and I think that's the society that we kind of raised in today, where men will not express themselves to anybody, not even to their spouse, right? But it's hard. Like we as men live a very tough life, because we have to be the strong one in the family. We have to be the provider. We have to, work the 9-to-5 job, or even 2 jobs. We have to ensure that our kids are fed and they're, fit, and they have the clothes, everything, all the pressure, right? But there's also women out there that are doing the exact same thing we're doing, and they have all the pressure as well. So it's not that it's just men, it's women in generally, but there's more pressure on men. We're let's kind of go down this path of, talking about into seeking help. Okay, seeking help is often seen as a sign of weakness among men. And I'll tell you, it's 100% true. About 10 years ago, I was going through some stuff mentally and physically, and I went and got some help. I didn't understand where I was mentally, and I felt that my marriage was potentially going to go away, and I felt like my friendship was going to go away. I felt like I was suffering at my job, so I went and got help. When I brought it to the attention of some of my bosses and people around me, my colleagues, there was that stigma of, oh man, you don't really need to go get it. You're fine. You're just being weak. Like, no, like I wasn't being weak. I really needed, someone else to talk to that was going to boost my self-esteem, that was going to get me back aligned to the natural state of who I needed to be and who I was, that my wife, dearly fell in love with, and who my kids, knew me as their dad. But there's still a stigma around men going to therapy or being open about their struggles. And I will say, if you're a listener out there that you are that person that has that stigma that towards people that have done this, I mean, I'm just going to say, grow up. I'm sorry. If you have not been able to get out and seek help for yourself, then maybe you just need to swallow your pride and go do it. because you will be surprised of what it can do for you, right? This leads, with the therapy, or like with the stigma with going to therapy and, being open about their struggles. This leads to many to bottle up their emotions, which can have devastating consequences. And what that means is the guys that, search out and they're getting the help, and then there's a consequence of circumstances, devastating circumstances, because they get to a point where they're tired of being made fun of. Their friends are constantly making fun of them, or their spouse is making fun of them for doing something that they thought was the best thing for them, and it leads to other things, down the mental path that, whatever I'm doing is wrong, or I'm the problem and I need to fix the problem. And I'll tell you, that's not true. It's not true at all. Right? Because of that, there is rising rates of mental health issues among men. And, in a lot of cases, we always say, women get together and they could gossip about everything. When men get together, we don't want to talk about anything other than hunting, fishing, trucks, what else? Sports. But there are times when we can open up about our mental issues, or we can open up about our struggles and our emotions. And you would be surprised of how many men out there that you're around would be willing to talk about it. To share the statistics on mental health, right? The challenges like depression, anxiety, and suicide rates, which proportionally affect men because of that, right? And like I said, 10 years ago when I was seeking some, mental health, with a psychiatrist and going through therapy, like I had those problems, right? I had the same exact things I just said. And it left me knowing that it's not the people around me that were causing the issues. It was myself causing the issues because I continued to bottle up my emotions and I would not express myself the way I needed to. So when we look at all of that and how it affects men, it leads to isolation. You can have a very talkative husband or friend, or spouse. You can have a very talkative person that wants to talk about everything, but deep down inside, they're going to isolate themselves one time or another. And when they do that, they don't have a place. They don't have the space to express their feelings. And you may feel like, you can express your feelings towards me. They won't. They'll just continue to isolate themselves, or they'll get to a point where they're going to tell you something that meets the intent to make you happy, right? And that's not what we want, right? We want people to feel that that men can open up about their true feelings and not get judged or chastised for what's going on. A lot of men struggle to communicate their emotions in relationships because they're not given the tools or encouragement to be vulnerable. This can lead to misunderstanding and even emotional distance in personal relationships. That's where I'm going with this, right? That's literally what I was saying earlier, is that we have men, we do struggle with it because we would like to open ourselves up and give an explanation of why we suffer in some cases, but we don't know how the person that we're talking about this is going to take it. Or we're not sure if they're just going to say, "Oh, don't worry about it. You're fine." Like, what you're feeling is what you're feeling, right? That's wrong. But the vulnerability of someone even just opening up and telling others what's going on is huge. That means that they need help, or that they look to you as a person that they can trust, and they can tell you the things that's going on in their life, where you can support them and give them the advice to help them with whatever they need help with. Many men fear they're not doing enough in their personal relationship with their spouses or their kids or with anybody, family, or they feel like they're not measuring up as their partners. When we look at this thing of marriage, like I do it sometimes even for my own wife. To my wife, is like, there's times that I'm constantly away for work, and I come home and I haven't measured up to the expectation of what we should have. And it's vice versa. My wife may feel the same way, right? But it's not the idea that we don't measure up to each other. It's just the idea that we're constantly together no matter what, and we just want to be around each other. Now, if you're Now, if you are in a verbal abusive relationship and your spouse is saying that you need to do X, Y, and Z, to meet their intent, then that's something totally different. And that can lead to other things, or it can lead them down the same path that we're talking about, but it could potentially hinder the relationship even more, right? As society continues to evolve, the traditional roles of men and women have become blurred. Men today feel lost and unsure about their purpose, especially when they are expected to redefine masculinity. And that's kind of what I was going back to previously about the new communities that we have in the society. It's fine, right? But when you have to redefine masculinity, it puts that blur in there that it's saying like some women might want a certain type of person, some women might want a different type of person. I don't know. That's when you go into your communication about how you guys will be in a partnership. But it's also knowing that the person that you're with, your spouse, your husband, or whatever, is not the person that you want them to be, but you truly still love them because you fell in love with the person, not the way that you thought they would. So you just need to look past that. All right. Men often feel they are chasing success after success, but once they achieve it, they left feeling empty, wondering if there's something more to life than just ticking off boxes. I feel that way a lot of times too when there's that idea like, hey, here's the end goal. I want to get there as fast as I can. And once I accomplish the goal, it's like, okay, what's next? There's so much more after that. There's so much more past that. But it's just understanding, what is the next game? Like for me, like career-wise, right? I finished one career. Now I'm kind of in this empty space of figuring out what my next career is. I think I know what it is, but I'm not really sure. But I'm excited for the next thing. And I'm in this void where I'm studying and I'm, spending time with my wife and kids. I feel that there's sometimes I'm spending a little too much time because like, I feel like I'm trying to meet my wife's needs a little bit more than what she wants. We discussed it recently, and it's like, oh, I feel like you're filling my needy needs. And I was like, yeah, sorry, I'm bored. Right. But I'm having that conversation with him. So she understands what I'm trying to do to support her and support the kids since I'm home a little bit more than what they're used to. Right. So when we look at this of why men, having a hard time to control their emotions or why they're struggling, right? We want to find ways that we can overcome the struggle, right? And it's okay to be vulnerable. I'm vulnerable in my podcast. I tell you things that I probably would never tell anybody else. Or in some cases when I have talked to people, I share a little bit more than probably what they want to hear, right? It's essential to emotional health and well-being. Vulnerability doesn't mean weakness. It's a strength that can open the door to a deeper connection with others. And I firmly believe that. There's things I have shared with people that they will look, oh, Chris, I can't believe you said that. That's great. You're being super vulnerable in your life. Like I'm sharing it to you because I trust you and I feel that you can learn from something I have to say. But it's that connection that we get with people. Other people will feel the same thing, but they're not sure how to communicate to others about it, and or they aren't sure how to deal with it or grasp the understanding of what they're going through. And I would probably say for some men, we need more safe spaces for men to talk openly about their challenges, whether it's through therapy, support groups, or just honest conversations with friends. It's important to have a network that fosters openness. Right. So for me at my church that we go to, I run the men's ministry, and this is kind of some of the stuff that I've been talking about lately is just having, safe spaces or space for men to openly talk about things that are going on in their life. And at no time are we chastising them or giving them negative feedback. We're very supportive, and we want them to feel that we care for them and that we understand that what they're going through is truly a struggle, and we can support them and help them out as they're going through it. Masculinity isn't a one-size-fits-all concept. Each man has the different ability to define what being a man means for them. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. Whether it's being a caring father, a passionate artist, or someone who challenges society expectations, right? So for me growing up, it was like, hey, what is a man? A man is a person that can go out and work the farm, work the fields, plant, do everything, and still come home and take care of all the chores that need to be around the house, and that was just kind of the reality I grew up around. Right. But as I've gotten older and had a family and, done life the way I've done life, it's very true, right? What it says, masculinity is not a one size fits all. For me, it was being a caring father. How can I care for my girls knowing that each of them have their own style, or each of them have their own relationship towards me. One of my daughters, it's very loving, caring. We like to fool around, like fight a little bit, openly talk, about certain things. My other daughter, it's just being there so she can talk to me and I listen, right? But there's also the challenging social expectations. How, as we as men, can adapt to what's going on around us, and how can we stay open to conversation with other people about it. So today we talked about the pressures men face from social expectation to mental health struggles and the quest for identity. The bottom line is that men are not immune to challenges, but by breaking down the barriers of stigma and embracing vulnerability, they can begin to heal. And that's what we want. We want every man to understand that what they're going through, other men have gone through it themselves. And there is this time for healing. There is this time to be vulnerable. There is this time to express your emotions around others or to others, through the healing process of life. If you're a man struggling with any of these issues, know that you're not alone. Like I just said, I've gone through it. Other people have gone through it. Talk to someone you trust. Seek support and take the first step towards healing. If you truly need to step out of the box and go see a therapy, go through therapy, seek additional help, go do it. I fully support it, right? But at the end of the day, we as men need to stop hiding behind our emotion. We need to be able to step out and express ourselves in a way that other people will understand us. And it's going to be okay, I promise. So if you really like this podcast today, please like and share it with other people around. Leave some comments if you have something to say. I really appreciate it. And again, this is Chris Damron, the host of Sacred Laughter Podcast, and we'll see you next time.